Wednesday. Hey, Em. Good morning. How you doing, girl? Today is the 27th of December, the day after Christmas. And it is 2018. And we're getting close to the new year. New Year's Day is on its way, and I've been thinking a little bit about what my New Year's resolutions will be. And I wonder if you have been thinking about what your New Year's resolutions will be. And I'm thinking maybe in the next letter that I send you, I might ask about what's going on in your mind regarding your goals for the future year. I know now is the time that a lot of people take stock and do an inventory of what they have and what they want. I'm the same way. What will my new year be like? What will 2019 be like for me? It'll be, I think, very much the same. But I don't know. I've been really making some amazing changes lately, a lot of big changes. So who knows? Maybe it won't be the same at all. Speaking of changes, what change that has really been taking over my life lately in the last week or so has been cooking. I am cooking up a storm in my kitchen in my apartment, and I am loving it. I think my interest in cooking has been persevering or sort of within me for a long, long time. And when I say a long, long time, I mean a good 5-10 years, maybe even longer. I know my mom was an avid cook. You know, she had 6 kids and she didn't go to work. She worked at home as a mother, raising her children. And a lot of that time involved time in the kitchen. And, you know, as a child growing up, you know, I think I certainly admired her and her skills in the kitchen. And, you know, there's a certain virtue associated with spending time in the kitchen. I think of it as very valuable work. I think of spending time in the kitchen as being important. You know, it's about satisfying needs, the needs of yourself and the needs of others. It's also about giving. It's about caring for yourself, caring for others. And, you know, I think there's a lot to be gained by spending a lot of time in the kitchen. And I'm not just talking about spending time in the kitchen. Clearly, I'm talking about using tools, kitchen instruments and tools to make food, to put together dishes. You know, that takes a lot of energy and coordination, imagination, creativity, skill, and, you know, common sense. And, you know, there's also something really enjoyable about kitchens. I know that, at least in American culture, the kitchen is often the center of the home. And I think that, in fact, people spend more money in and around their kitchens than they do in any other place. And that other places might include cars and clothing and bedding and what goes on in the bathroom. I think a lot of money is devoted to what goes on in the kitchen, and a lot of attention is devoted to what goes on in the kitchen. I think, you know, people every once in a while, they step up out of their living room, out of the couch, and they walk to the kitchen and they check out and see what is in the refrigerator, right? Or what's in the cupboards. Human beings, we need energy to fuel this massive brain of ours. It takes glucose, and we need it now. And so, you know, humans are often in the kitchen trying to feed our voracious brains with the glucose that our brains need to survive. And you know what? I think, you know, it's important to our survival to have kitchens and to be effective in them. And so, anyway, for me, that is a few ideas that lay the groundwork for why I think spending time in kitchens cooking is a wonderful idea. And, I've been doing that this week. I've been spending a lot of time in the kitchen. I've been inspired, believe it or not, by Bisquick. There's something about it, this whole idea of putting together just a few items and throwing it into the oven and ending up with a result that's amazing, really enjoyable to eat, something that smells good, something that's maybe home style cooking, something that is really satisfying, sort of a warming foods, particularly now in wintertime, this holiday season. I crave spending time in the kitchen. I value spending time in the kitchen. And that's what I've been doing. In fact, in the last 48 hours, I've cooked a number of dishes. Number one, I made some vegan chocolate chip cookies. I might have mentioned this in a previous episode. I've also made a cauliflower and cheese vegetable bake. Essentially, it's a casserole. And I made that in I guess I used a pie dish to prepare that in. I just finished making fudge brownies, and so I'm pretty excited about that. In fact, right after this, I'll probably take the brownies out of the pan and weigh them. And because everything I cook is a calorie conscious food, once I weigh the end result of the brownies, I'll know how many calories per gram I've got in my brownie snacks. Let's see, what else did I make? Recently, I also made tortillas. I threw together some flour, some salt, and some water, and I fried up tortillas on the stovetop of my range, on the stovetop. And wow, let me tell you, I am really enjoying tortillas. I can do a lot of things with tortillas. I can make soft tacos out of the tortillas. I can make burritos out of the tortillas. I can just use the tortillas as, toast by popping them into the toaster and then spreading butter on top of the tortillas. I'm really enjoying the tortillas I made. And let's see, what else have I made? Oh yeah, I also made some granola bars. I made granola bars that were filled with wheat bread and oats and sugar and raisins. And man, let me tell you, they taste fantastic. And I'm also looking forward to maybe even making another batch of granola bars with some chocolate chips in them. So I'm having a really good time in my kitchen. In fact, today even though I've already made fudge brownies, I am looking forward to whipping up a batch of banana bread. I went to the store earlier this morning and I picked up a couple of bananas that I'm going to make use for my banana bread. So I am and that was within 48 hours. I produced easily a good 5 amazing dishes. And I've been enjoying those dishes through my meals at mealtime for the last 48 hours, and I've really been enjoying that. It feels so nice to have food pre-prepared in the refrigerator, ready for warming in a microwave oven or on the stovetop. Food that I love to eat, food that's tasty. So I think I might be, I am inspired to work in the kitchen right now. And I'm finding it really exciting. In fact, I've ordered a few cookbooks from Amazon and I'm raring to go. It's true. And boy, there's just something about cooking that is just so satisfying. I'm also looking forward to gifting foods. I've been looking into procuring some see-through plastic bags that I can transport loaves of bread in. as I gift them to other people. I'm thinking about making banana bread and raisin bread and pumpkin bread, zucchini bread. I know. I'm really stoked about this. I'm serious about it. This cooking extravaganza that I'm going through right now, I mean, it's really real. And I certainly hope that later on, as the weeks pass and as the weekends pass, that I end up spending as much time or even more time in the kitchen as I am now. I think it's sort of a tragedy that people do not spend a lot of time in kitchens. A lot of the time, people are out and about. They're very busy doing the things they do every day. They go to work, they have children. And people often choose convenience foods in fast food restaurants. In fact, one tragic thing I saw, it was Christmas Day. I was driving home from the grocery store after having purchased I think some food that I was going to cook later on. And being Christmas Day meant that a lot of restaurants and grocery stores and things were closed. There were definitely some closures. I noticed gas stations were closed and other things. Oh, this is on my way coming back from Grover Beach, where I had a beach bonfire with a group of friends that I have. And on my way back, it was late at night. I noticed that a lot of people were queuing up at the one or two fast food restaurants that just happened to be open. The main ones weren't open, like the Taco Bells and the McDonald's were all closed. But the Carl's Jr.'s and the Jack in the Boxes were open. And man, the lines going into those restaurants were formidable. And I was thinking to myself, how sad that was. These people were waiting in line maybe 20, 30 minutes to get a hamburger. They could have probably made it home in 10 minutes. Now, of course, I'm making a generalization. I'm making some assumptions. The assumptions are that they had a home to go to, that they had a kitchen to use. Maybe a lot of these people were out of town. So that's understandable. So maybe it wasn't quite. Maybe the true reality is not that it was as tragic as that I thought it was. And so that's good. I really hope that that's the case. I really hope that that's the case. Yeah. So yeah, I've been enjoying cooking lately, and I'm particularly enjoying using Bisquick baking mix. And I think eventually I'll be graduating away from the Bisquick and be producing my own flour baking mix concoction. That'll probably happen in a month or two. But for me, it's reassuring, it's confidence building to use Bisquick as sort of a stepping stone to spending more time in the kitchen. And now what's interesting is I'm not necessarily thinking that what's happening in my kitchen is healthier than what has been happening in previous months and previous weeks. When prior to my interest in cooking, a lot of the foods that I ate were pretty basic: beans, rice, lentils, salad. I would assemble sandwiches. I'd put together some pasta. Sometimes I'd eat canned vegetables and roasted vegetables in the oven. Now, I think, and probably for dessert, I'd have fruit, mainly strawberries, grapes, and blueberries. Now, that is a very healthy diet. And at least in my opinion, a very, very healthy diet. Now, this diet that I have now is different. I think it's probably a little more wheat-centric than it has been in the past. And it might even be higher in salt, I've been thinking lately. Maybe not. But it's definitely more wheat-centric. And, like I said, I think so what's happening is I'm replacing, because of the convenience of baking and how much I'm enjoying baking, I think I'm eating a lot more wheat products than I was before. Before I was eating more rice and beans and maybe even more fruit. So for me, there's a finite number of calories that I eat every day. I mean, it's fixed. And so if I add wheat, I've got to lose other things, right? So my food may not be what I'd call more healthy, but it's only slightly less healthy. And I'm eating more wheat. So that's not too bad, right? I am enjoying the process, though. For me, spending a lot of time in the kitchen is very empowering. I'm building confidence. I'm building confidence in the kitchen. I'm building confidence with my kitchen knives and how to use them, and my cutting boards and all the tools that I use to assemble all the ingredients. So that's really good news. Really glad to see it happening. It's about time too. What held me back in the past was problems with calorie counting, believe it or not. It's just so easy to put together simple meals. And when I started to get really complex meals, things started getting a little bit out of hand. I wasn't able to be as accurate as I wanted to be. And really I've only been able to sort of manage this new cooking style because I've developed some new techniques for accurately performing calorie counting on the foods that I make in the kitchen. So that's been allowing me to make more complex foods. And that's really what is fueling this interest in cooking. It's new mathematical techniques, new analytical techniques. And I'm using a notebook and calculator in the kitchen now. Let me tell you, it all boils down to functions. It boils down to chemistry. Anyway, enough of that. So let's see what else is going on. What's been going on in my mind lately? Well, I'll tell you what, we can move on to the next segment. And I figured I'd break out the old reading glasses and read a little bit from my book today, The Oxford Companion to Philosophy by Hondrich, which is really an excellent book that I enjoy reading. I'm going to see what I can do to figure out what year it was published in. 1995. So, at least in my view, it's a rather new book. It's only 25 years old, which is new in my view. So I thought it might be fun to examine a philosopher's view of the subject of laughter. Let's find out what laughter really is, at least from a philosophical standpoint, from an Oxford companion to philosophy standpoint. All right. So I'll just read the passage that relates that is titled Laughter here. It says, laughter is a psychophysical phenomenon. Okay. Against which a number of philosophical theories of mental and personal identity can be tested. I love that. Oh, yes. Yes, these theories can be tested against laughter. What a way of framing that sentence. If laughter is essential to the psychology of humor, comma, then a creature endowed with humor must be embodied. Where the heck are they getting this? I'll read that sentence again. If laughter is essential to the psychology of humor, then a creature endowed with humor must be embodied. Whoa. So I believe that I'm a creature endowed with humor. I think all people are creatures endowed with humor. But since the bodily postures and motions, which are characteristic of laughter, can occur in the absence of amusement, laughter cannot be simply a physical occurrence. Of course, it couldn't be simply a physical occurrence. Aristotle uses these considerations to support a theory of human nature, according to which a person is not identical with a body, yet does not exist without a body. More recently, John Wisdom has hinted at how humor and its objects can provide helpful pointers to the analysis of the relation between subjective and objective elements in the nature of value. The topic deserves more attention in the philosophy of mind. It's kind of funny. A lot of these passages, these definitions in the Oxford Companion to Philosophy, I have high regard for the Oxford Companion books, of which there are many. And I only have one. There's a whole series of Oxford related material. It's interesting that I guess the last two definitions that I've read in this book have just been so odd. I think they're trying a little bit too hard to define laughter in a philosophical point. Talking about how laughter gives insight into the subjective and objective dichotomies. This whole idea that laughter cannot simply be a physical occurrence. What is that? I'm a materialist. I believe, how can it, I'm not even sure what that statement means. It's not purely a physical occurrence. What? I'm a physicist. Everything is a physical occurrence. So what else is it if it isn't? What an odd passage. But thank you very much for the material, Oxford. Appreciate it. That's definitely an interesting passage. It strikes me as interesting that I would call that sort of an awkward treatment of laughter and what it is. And I wonder if it has anything to do with the culture that sort of produced it. I know that's not to say. Let me think. The United Kingdom or England has a fantastic tradition of humor. In fact, it's a tradition that I admire and enjoy on a regular basis. So I'm really not sure why that's such a disjointed definition there. And it just doesn't seem to flow very naturally. Not a purely physical occurrence. Okay. All right. So maybe we can move on to the next section of our presentation today, and that is the question and answer period. So the first question here that I'm going to be answering today is number 86. How many credit cards do you have, and how often do you use them? Well, I only have one credit card, and I actually use it quite a bit. And that is probably 3, 4, 5 times a month. Why? Well, actually, because my debit card's kind of busted. The magnetic strip is just not functioning very well. And sometimes if there's a magnetic strip register, I'll use my credit card magnetic strip because it just happens to work better. I pay off that credit card every month, of course. And, the responsible thing to do. But really, the only reason I use it at all, is because the magnetic strip on my debit card isn't functioning right. Now, the chip works great, but the magnetic strip isn't working. And I've basically been putting off getting that debit card replaced because it's kind of a hassle, because of all the stored credit card numbers I have all over the web that pays my bills on a regular basis. If I got a new debit card, I'd have to change the card numbers. So I'm just kind of lazy, I guess. But that's really the only reason I use my credit card at all. All right, next question. Question number 87. How often do you leisurely eat a meal with friends? Well, that's, it doesn't happen too often. It might happen once or twice a week, which I think in the stream of things, is not a whole lot. I think there are other people who spend a lot more time eating meals with other people. What I've been enjoying lately is going to potluck meals and eating those potlucks with friends. And in fact, I've got two potlucks that I could be visiting regularly each month. And in fact, I plan to participate more in those potluck meals. And especially now that I have an interest in cooking, I think I'm going to be throwing together a meal and sharing them at potlucks more often. So I'll be looking forward to that. But it doesn't happen too often, maybe once or twice a week. Now that for me is not too often. I could certainly arrange my life so that I did eat more often with other people, nearly maybe even 5 times a week. But recently I've just been choosing not to do that. It's just a challenge. When people eat out a lot, that's a challenge in terms of dietary habit and things like that. Okay, question number 88. Who's the jolliest person I know? Describe him or her. Well, that is an easy question to answer. The jolliest person I know is me. Now, yeah, I seem to think that I seem to be the jolliest person I know. Now, it turns out that I think there are more jolly people around. And I think they may be younger than me. Oh, yeah. For some reason, I have a sense. I just met a person the other day, I guess last weekend, who seemed to be really jolly. And let me tell you something. Let me tell you. I would like to tell you. May I offer to tell you something? I really admire jolly people, and I like to hang around them. I think they're fun and interesting people to hang around with. And if I see a jolly person, I make an effort to get by their side and spend time with them. It is a real, tangible decision that I make. It's a choice that I make to hang around people who I think are jolly. And interestingly enough, contrary to that, related to that is if there's a person that I notice who's particularly dreary and complaining, I actively decide to spend less time with them. I don't know. It's just something about me. It's just it's just a personality quirk. I follow the energy. Question number 89. What sound drives you crazy? Well, I don't think there's any sound that drives me crazy per se. There is one thing that I don't care for very much. And I think some would find it a little bit unusual. Maybe you'd find it unusual. The sound that I don't particularly care for is road noise. That's right. When I'm driving down the road and the wind is buffeting against my vehicle, or the tires are rolling along the road, all of this makes noise. The shimmy shimmy of the car as I drive over bumps, the roar of the engine revving, just that road noise, that continual drone. Now, it doesn't bother me, right? I just prefer not to have the road noise happening. I really appreciate vehicles that are well made. Like, I've been in some like Mercedes-Benz and BMW vehicles where you're not even aware, as a passenger, of how fast the car is going because the car is so well made. And what I'd call ambient noise within the cab is really low. And I love driving in those cars because there's not a lot of road noise. What is somewhat distracting to me is when I, as a driver, am trying to talk to a passenger and this road noise is so loud that I have to amplify my voice. I have to kind of yell out like, "Hey, what's going on?" I have to raise my voice just to be heard because it's so loud outside. So, um, that's interesting, I guess. It doesn't drive me crazy. In fact, last weekend I did drive to Knott's Berry Farm. That was what, 3.5 hours one way, 3.5 hours back. That's 7 hours of driving, and I tolerated the road noise just fine. And that's normal. I can tolerate it. But I kind of wish kind of always wishing that there was less noise while driving on the road. Now, why is that? I don't know. It's about being able to speak with another person. For me, having conversations with other people is a real joy. I love to share myself with others, and I love when others share themselves with me in connecting conversation. And one thing that sort of disrupts the transmission of information from person A to person B is the ambient noise level. I really appreciate quiet spaces. In fact, other bothersome sounds, in particular, is inside restaurants, particularly those restaurants that have, say, tall ceilings that are made of cement and walls that are made of cement, maybe floors made of cement, and the sound just bounces off of every wall, and chairs moving back and forth, and people using their utensils to eat food, and the clinking and the clacking and the sound of other people's voices in conversation while inside restaurants is a challenge for me. It's not that I have trouble hearing other people, although I do sometimes. It has nothing to do with my hearing. My hearing is completely normal. It's just that I want to understand when other people speak to me. And when I'm sitting at a restaurant enjoying a meal, I would like to have a nice conversation with another person. But if it's just so loud that I have to raise my voice continually to get my point across, and they have to do the same when they're talking to me, it's a real challenge. So, yeah, that ambient noise in restaurants, the ambient noise inside my vehicle when I'm driving down the road. It's kind of interesting to note that, there's an evolutionary aspect to, I think, this problem with noise. Human ears over the millennia have adapted to sounds in an environment that's very quiet, except for the wind. I can imagine a person on the plains living, say, in a tribe where they do a lot of traveling, you know, but on foot. Maybe they're walking through a forest or walking over the desert or on a grassland. There are not a lot of noises to be heard. Quite often it's very silent. In fact, particularly during the wintertime, I know that when I'm walking around where there's snow, in fact, that snow can dampen noise, and it's very quiet outdoors. And there are just not a lot of distracting sounds. But now, today, in our society, it's so industrial that there's all kinds of noise made by machines coming in at every angle. In fact, here I'm in my home. Nearby, there's a parking lot on the other side of this apartment complex, on the other side of the wall, and there are vehicles that are parked there. And these vehicles, sometimes they have alarm systems that go off, And sometimes they go off pretty routinely. These noises just sort of come into our environment. They're basically a part of our environment now. Everyone's got a cell phone, and they're packing in a cell phone, and they get these phone calls. The ringers are actually quite loud quite often and startling to some. Now, they don't necessarily startle me, but I'm just using that as an example of how we're surrounded by machines that make noise now. And that's a relatively new phenomenon, ever since what I'd call the industrial age. We've been having our ears have been having to deal with a lot of the sounds that machines make. And so I guess in general, if there was any sound that made me crazy, the sound would be just the everyday sounds of machines in cars and in restaurants. And they don't drive me crazy, but I do think that they are somewhat bothersome. They inhibit what I'd call intimate conversation, and they also inhibit thought. I know when sounds happen that are loud enough around me while I'm trying to think deeply about a certain subject, or read a book, or listen to music, my attention gets distracted. My attention is drawn to the loud noise. Yeah. Okay, next question. What sound lulls you to sleep? Well, I do have a favorite sound that lulls me to sleep. Now, there are a lot of sounds that I enjoy, but I think that there is one sound in particular that lulls me to sleep, and that is the sound of crickets cricketing. Sort of there's this nighttime cricketing, or cicadas making their sounds in the evening. It's those sounds of cicadas and crickets that really get me associating those sounds with sleep. Yeah. In fact, for me, that's a wonderful way for me to fall asleep, because I heard that when I was a boy. When I was a child, those sounds of crickets or cicadas during the summertime months in the evenings were very loud, and they were sounds that I frequently went to bed listening to. And so I have really pleasant memories associated with the sounds of crickets. Mm-hmm. There are other sounds that I enjoy as I fall asleep. For example, I love the sounds of ocean waves. I particularly love the sound of raindrops falling on a roof. I also like the sound of the wind buffeting up against the buildings and the windows. I could find that quite calming, so long as the wind is not that strong. Okay. If the wind is above, say, 20 miles per hour, then it becomes more distracting than anything and prevents me from falling asleep. Okay, next question. Question number 91. Who's the smartest person I know? The smartest person I know. Oh, man. So here's the thing. I refrain from talking about intelligence very often, because even though I think it is a thing, that it is significant, I'm also aware that there are a lot of different kinds of intelligence. There's social intelligence, emotional intelligence. There's physical intelligence, where people are able to maneuver their body, or maybe mechanical intelligence, where they're able to manipulate tools to fix machines. There's number intelligence. There's language intelligence. There's so many different kinds of intelligence, and I really just can't sort of decide on what the best intelligence is. Intelligence is, relative to context, and it's relative to survival and fitness in one's environment. And, different people live in different environments, and they develop intelligence associated with those environments. And so I'm really reluctant to talk about intelligence just in general, like as if it were some abstract efficiency of neurons and brains. it's all relative to the context that people are in. So I guess I could talk about emotionally intelligent people and socially intelligent people. And it's kind of funny. Just there might be people who are highly socially intelligent but have deficits, serious deficits in other kinds of intelligence, maybe like analytical intelligence. Uh, and it's kind of interesting. Some intelligences work side by side, hand in hand, but other intelligences don't. They're opposites. Anyway, now there is what I'd call like a Western stereotypical intelligence. Boy, you know what? I really can't even say. It's so hard to tell. With look, if I was in school, in the school setting, I would probably point to the kids who would always get the A pluses in the class. That is of interest to me. I would be able to identify the most intelligent people in that context. But just I don't know, in any context, on average, I don't know. Some of the smartest people I know, like I had a high school classmate. He got a salutatorian. No, actually, he didn't get salutatorian. He was one notch below that. And I thought he was just super duper smart. And turns out, he was very book smart, but in other aspects, his social intelligence levels were just not very high. And he hasn't necessarily, he's done well, but he hasn't necessarily thrived, say, in business. And so it's kind of interesting. It's hard to generalize. Next question. Question number 92. What food do you eat for comfort? Well, lately, the foods that I've been eating for comfort have been potatoes. Russet potatoes and sweet potatoes. Those are my comfort foods. And sometimes I go to rice. I enjoy rice, but here's the thing. I don't enjoy it that much. I think what I probably ought to do is I ought to start eating more white rice. I have a feeling that white rice might be a little bit more food comforting than brown rice. I'm not sure why I think that. But I think for me, white rice is more comforting than brown rice. Now, the thing is, I actually choose to eat brown rice most of the time. And so for that reason, rice itself is not necessarily a comfort food for me. But potatoes are. To me, in fact, you know what else is a comfort food? Beets. I don't understand it either. Beets. But you know what else is comforting? Bread. Bread is very much a comfort food for me. Wheat bread. I would guess that bread is more of a comfort food to me than even potatoes. Getting my hands on some kind of whole wheat bread or sourdough bread or even tortilla. Now that is something that offers me real deep, satisfying comfort. Okay, next question. Question number 93. How often do you read the newspaper and which sections do you turn to first? So I don't read the newspaper very often. I haven't bought one in a long time. The last newspaper I did buy was the New York Times. And I bought the Kindle e-edition just because I had an interest in what the news was for the day. I think it might have been maybe last month around Thanksgiving when I was interested in reading the news, reading the New York Times. And it was just a hankering that I happened to have at the time. And then once I bought a 99-cent version or edition of the news, once I've read it or even a part of it, I'm satisfied. And I haven't had that inclination for a long time. I tend not to get newspaper news. If I do read news, it would be internet news articles. So, which sections do I turn to first in the newspaper? Well, the first section I turn to is the front page, of course, as I look at the newspaper for the first time. I look at the main articles. I trust the judgment of the editors to steer my attention to articles that are important for the day. And in fact, it's quite natural to go to the front page. After I peruse the first section A of the newspaper, then I probably have a tendency to go into the business side. I'll read the business section. Then I might very quickly peruse the politics section. And then after that, then I will probably hit the specialty sections like the books section or the movies section or anything related to arts and the community. Mm-hmm. So that's how I read a newspaper. Interestingly enough, that is essentially how newspapers are assembled anyway. So when it comes to reading newspapers, I will just rifle through the sections in what I'd call a normal or natural sequence. Okay, next question. Now, how often do I read the newspaper? Maybe once every 2 months. I kind of have a feeling that I don't read it even that often, but I will peruse. Let's say I don't read the newspaper, I peruse the newspaper. And that's not to say that I don't care for news. I think for me, news is very interesting reading. I really appreciate the information that's being provided. And but I don't necessarily make a strong habit of it. It's not, well, there is a kind of news that is very important to me. Health and nutrition news is very important to me. I would say it's that kind of news that is more intriguing and interesting to me than most. I think it has to do with some of the science aspects of it. I'm interested in the clinical studies that have been published recently about one disease or another. I'm interested in how things work. I'm curious about DNA and genome sequencing. I'm interested in anything related to health, really. What foods or chemicals or plants or whatever is in our environment affecting people's health, viruses, that kind of news is important to me, because it has a bearing on my life. I think that's why. I'm quite interested in articles about obesity and about viruses, E. coli, things like that. Why? Because they bear on my health. Recently there's been scares related to like E. coli in romaine lettuce. I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on those articles. Quite often I'll just read the title and that'll be enough to help remind me to stay away from one thing or another, at least for a while. And so, that's the kind of news that I enjoy reading. So next question. Question number 94. In one sentence, how would you describe your best friend? That's a good question. How would I describe my best friend? Well, I have a lot of friends, and I'm not sure I could say that I have a best friend. But how would I describe them? I think I would describe them as equanimous, loyal, thoughtful, kind, balanced. Yeah. And I think I'm using those words as I'm just sort of using my friends as an aggregate. And another word that I would use is accepting. Yeah. Okay. Question number 95. How long on average does it take you to fall asleep once you turn out the lights? I think that on average it takes me about 15, 20 minutes to fall asleep, which is not a long time at all. I'm very lucky that for the most part, I get good amounts of sleep every night and I fall asleep really early. I fall asleep, in 15, 20 minutes. Now, sometimes it might take me 30 minutes to fall asleep, sometimes an hour. But in general, I think it takes me about 15 to 20 minutes to fall asleep on average. Question number 96. What items do you currently have stored in the trunk of your car? All right. Well, of course, I have about a lot of the items that are this that other people have. For example, I have a toolbox that I can do routine maintenance on a vehicle with. I also have some jumper cables, right, in case my battery needs to be recharged. And then I've got other things. I've got a container of water that I can use in case my radiator drains itself of liquid and I need some water in my radiator real quick, maybe to make it to the next gas station or something like that. So I definitely have that. Those are the three main things that I have in my car in the back. I also I was about to say, oh yeah, I've got a first aid kit. Definitely, that's nice to have. That first aid kit's got a lot of neat stuff in it, like I don't know, anti-mosquito spray, stuff like that. I also have a fire extinguisher, but I don't have that in the far back. That's just behind my seat. That's useful and helpful to have. Then I've got a lot of other extraneous stuff that is nice to have. For example, I've got a picnic blanket. In fact, I've got two picnic blankets. I've got a picnic blanket for the beach that I use when I want a picnic blanket on sand. It's essentially a plastic picnic blanket. Then I have another picnic blanket that I use on grass, and that is a textile blanket. I think it's made of cotton. So that makes a lot of sense. I don't necessarily put cotton blankets on the beach because they get really sandy and get kind of gross. Other things that I got in my vehicle, I've got a spare scale for calorie counting when I'm out and about. I also have a lot of fitness equipment. I've got a basketball, soccer ball, volleyball. I've got a baseball and glove. I've got a ping pong paddle and some ping pong balls. I've got a frisbee. Gotta have a frisbee. I've got frisbee golf frisbees. Like I've got regular frisbee and frisbee golf frisbees. That pretty much covers what I got. I also have something else. I have a bag that's got a change of clothes in it. You see, I have that for various reasons. You never know when you're going to need a sweater, right? It's basically a spare sweater in case I need one. I've got a sweater back there. Um, I'm cognizant of the fact that at any time I could rip my pants or get my pants soiled in some way that I can't wear them. And so I've got a pair of pants and a belt. It's just an old belt that I have as a spare. And I've got a shirt too. At any time I could spill some kind of whatever on a shirt and need to change right away. And so I've got a spare clothing. I've got a spare pair of shoes, spare pair of socks, spare underwear. And I also have a toilet paper roll. You never know when you might need one, right? Absolutely. I also have in the back, I've got some contact lens solution and a few contact lens cases. Basically a lot of this, it has to do with what happens if, what if there's a problem of some kind and I'm having trouble solving it. It's nice to have spare equipment. And believe it or not, since I've got a minivan, it's really easy for me to pack stuff in it. And things transport well in it. I've got a lot of space, and so I use it. All right, next question. Question number 97. What animals scare you the most and why? Well, An animal that I just do not care for is a snake. I don't particularly care for snakes. I will be around snakes and touch snakes, and I don't have any problems watching snakes. But and but if there was an animal that could be said to scare me the most, it would be a snake. Now, I've never had any real problems with snakes before, thankfully. I just don't care for the way they move. There's something. I think it's I think it's some evolutionary adaptation. But they kind of spook me a little bit. Now, are there any other animals? Well, there is another animal that I'm very cautious around, and that is dogs. Dogs can be somewhat unpredictable. They can also be very powerful and overpowering. Um, they can run very fast, and if they're agitated, that could be a problem. So now, I'm, of course, I'm not. I wouldn't ever say that I was scared of snakes or scared of dogs in general. I mean, I also love dogs. I think dogs are amazing. I wouldn't say that I necessarily love snakes, but I do find snakes fascinating. I don't love snakes the same way I love dogs. But I think that both dogs and snakes can be particularly unpredictable. And they can be unpredictable in an injury-making way. And for that reason, I mean, that's the why about it. That's the why. So I do tend to be cautious around dogs and snakes. And I wouldn't necessarily use the phrase that they scare me. It's just that I am cautious around them. So next question number 98. What remedy for curing the common cold works best for you? Well, I believe that exercise is the remedy that cures the common. I don't know if it would cure the common cold, but I know it's prevented me from getting common colds. I used to get common colds all the time when I wasn't exercising. And now that I exercise a lot, I almost never get sick. And if I do get sick, it's only like the intensity is a quarter to even a fifth, maybe even a sixth of what it used to be. I can shake it off faster than I ever have. And so I almost never get colds or flu anymore. And since I take the flu shot, I'm relatively immune to even the flu. So thankfully, that's the case. Now, the question was, what remedy do I have for curing the common cold? If I was going to talk to one, believe it or not, I think it might be hydrogen peroxide. Gargling with hydrogen peroxide just seems to work in reducing the intensity of a cold, or preventing it from starting up. Okay, so gargling hydrogen peroxide. Now, I don't have any other cures. I haven't run into anything that is useful. I know a lot of people use echinacea and they swear by vitamin C and all that, take zinc tablets and all that stuff. None of that stuff has ever worked for me. Echinacea, vitamin C, zinc, never even worked for me. It doesn't seem to do any good, at least for me. And so for me, I know a lot of people load up on these herbal remedies. I'm not one to do that. I haven't found something that works for me. Question 99. Where are you ticklish, and how much does it bother you to be tickled? Well, I'd guess that I'm mostly ticklish around my rib cage and mostly around my rib cage, I think. Where else? I'm sort of touching myself to figure out, where am I ticklish? I think it's mostly just my rib cage and my belly. Now, how much does it bother me to be tickled? Well, as an adult, it is somewhat bothersome. I don't care to be tickled necessarily. I don't find it particularly funny. Yeah. So, and even as a kid, I don't think I found it particularly funny then either. It's kind of, I don't know what tickling is. It's almost like laughter, right? Tickling and laughter they almost seem to be somewhat separate. One is triggered in a very intellectual, ironic type misinformation type way. And then another one is a very physical, it's sort of like the anticipation of a touch. And I would be interested to learn more about the difference between humor as it relates to being ticklish and as it relates to, jokes, like knock knock jokes. Okay. Now, how much does it bother me to be tickled? Let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, or where 10 is like major bother and 1 is not bothersome at all. I'd say it'd be about a 5 or so. I don't have any. It's just been a long time since I think I've been tickled on purpose. So maybe that's my problem. Okay, question number 100. Is the paper money in your possession right now organized sequentially according to denomination and with the bills right side up and facing the same way? Why or why not? So I actually have no money in my wallet right now. And in the past, when I have had money, I don't necessarily organize the money sequentially. I mean, I might, but I would say that 80% of the time I don't necessarily put it in order. Although, maybe I would. It's not the first thing I think about when I'm handling money. I guess when I'm counting it up, I do put it in order. I have had many jobs where I was working the cash register, and so it's not that I don't care to or have to. In fact, the true answer just might be that it's so automatic that I don't pay attention to when I do it. Now, here's the thing. I haven't worked with money at my job for decades now. It's been quite a long time. I was only working with money when before I had graduated from college, when I had a lot of jobs, just temporary jobs, where I would work at the cash register. And so, I might have a few habitual ways of managing money, but I'm not so focused on money to always keep the bills in the right denomination with the right sequence. Okay. All right. So I think I'm going to wrap things up right now, Emily. Right now it is your winter vacation. And, you're enjoying some quiet time after, I'm sure, a very hectic semester during your freshman year of high school. And I know you're recharging your batteries and getting resituated with your life, getting reorganized. I'm sure you're learning and growing. And I believe you may even be traveling now. I wouldn't be surprised if you're traveling. Maybe you visited San Francisco or other places in California, or maybe Santa Barbara this winter break. I'm glad that you're having a lot of cool experiences in your travels, going on day trips. I hope you had a really enjoyable Christmas time, Christmas Day. I'm looking forward to seeing you again whenever that time will be. I'm always interested in watching a movie or chatting on the phone or maybe instant messaging. So I'm always open to that, and I invite you to reach out if you have any desire to have a conversation or anything like that. I'd appreciate that. In the meantime, I'm gonna move along my merry way and enjoy my life to the fullest that I can. In fact, I've got amazing plans coming up this weekend. I'm going to be traveling to Six Flags Amusement Park in Valencia, Santa Clarita, California, and I'll be looking forward to doing that. What's interesting is that I think that will mark the fourth time in a row, the fourth weekend in December when I'm at an amusement park. So I'm living it up. I mean, if anyone could be said to be living it up somehow, I am living it up. So I'm really looking forward to visiting the amusement park. I want you to know that you are always invited to spend time with me at the amusement park. You have an open invitation to come along with me. You can bring your mom and your stepdad, and we can spend the day on roller coasters and Ferris wheels and eating amusement park food. Yeah. So anyway, that's an open invitation, an offer for us to build more connection together in the future. So with that, I'll talk to you later, and I hope you have a great rest of your winter break. Bye-bye.